This video is continuing the series about programming, and this time we're looking at selection. For this course you need to know the three different types of program flow: sequence, selection and iteration. And this video is going to be looking at selection. There's two different types that you need to be aware of for this course. Now most of you are going to be familiar with programming in Python, where you will use if-else statements for your selection. You can't technically do a switch case statement in Python, but you can in many other programming languages, and it might come up on your exam, so you need to know what it is. Now the word or the term program flow is basically the order that the steps are carried out in within your program. So sometimes your computer is going to run the program and it might jump to a different line of code depending on what's happening during the program. The type of selection that you're most familiar with is going to be an if statement. So an if statement allows you to check if a condition is true or false. It also allows you to put other things in, like Boolean operators, so that you can combine multiple different conditions as well. So this means that depending on whether something is true or false, they're going to decide what the next line of code that gets carried out is. So the most important thing and the best way of learning is to see examples. So just using this flowchart, you should know by now what the flowchart symbols mean. We know that we're always going to have a start and a stop. So let's look at this particular flowchart. We're looking at an input first of all. So if the user inputs some sort of data, in this case it's going to be a value called x. So I've created a variable called x. The user is going to type in whatever their value they ask for. In this case, it could be something like a password. So if x is equal to Apple, so is x equal to Apple? If yes, then allow access. If no, then deny access. That's like a really simple flowchart using an if statement for a password entry system. So if we look at some Python code, because that's the one that you're probably most familiar with for that simple flowchart. So we need to set a variable. Well, in this case, it's actually going to be a constant. Password is equal to Apple. So we're setting the value of that particular variable or constant. In this case it's a constant. We're setting it to Apple, and it's a constant because it's not going to change during the program. Then we create a variable called x. Now this could be something else, like, I don't know, user input or user's guess or whatever you want it to be. That's a variable because it's going to change. So they're going to input a value, they're going to type in their password. So the message is going to come up on the screen, enter your password, they will type it in. If what they type in, so if x is equal to password, then it's going to say you're allowed access. Otherwise, it's going to say access denied. So if they type in the word Apple, it will say you are allowed access. If they type in anything else, it will say access denied. And that is a basic if statement. That is selection. The program flow is changing depending on what you type in. We can have more complex program flow using nested if statements. So this is when you basically put one if statement inside another one. And you'll need to do this sometimes if you want to do two particular checks or two particular conditions. So the best example for this is if your username is correct, then you need to do another check to see if the password is correct. So if we look at an example of that, it might be a little bit easier to understand. So in this particular program, we've got a constant called Dave. Username equals Dave. That has been the value that I've set as that username. Then we've got a constant called password, and we've set that to Apple like we did previously. This time we're going to need two inputs from the user. So the user variable, you can call that whatever you want. In this case, I've just put Y. Then we're going to have X for the password. So what we need to do is on the fifth line down, we're going to do our first if statement. If Y is equal to username, then we're going to do the next if statement. If it isn't equal to username, then it just says access denied straight away. If it is, then you're going to check to see whether the password that they type in is equal to Apple. If it's equal to Apple, then it'll say you are allowed access. If it's not equal to Apple, then it's going to say access denied. So if you just take a minute to look at the program itself, imagine that you're running the program. It's going to come up, enter your username, type in Dave, and it will go to it will ask you to enter your password, and it's going to check to see if your password is equal to Apple. If it is, it allows access. If it's not, it's access denied. That is an example of a nested if statement. We also have something called an if-else if statement. So in Python, this is shortened down to elif. So you might have used elif quite a few times in programs that you've created in Python. An if-else if statement is used to check multiple conditions. So if the first one isn't true, it will go on to the next one to check if that's true, and the next one to check if that's true, and so on. So if we look at a little example of that, it'll make a bit more sense. So if we look at this flowchart, we're starting the program, and then your first if condition is if you want to vote for Trump. So if your program has got a variable, for example, vote, and you've asked them to type in their vote, if they type in Trump, then it will follow the arrow down to yes. So it will add one vote for Trump and stop the program. If you don't type in Trump, it's going to check to see whether you've typed in Clinton. If you've typed in Clinton, then it'll add a vote for Clinton and stop the program. If you haven't typed in Clinton either, it'll go on to the next question, and it'll check to see if you've voted for Weir. If you voted for Weir, then you're a smart person and you are going to add one vote for Weir. If you haven't voted for that either and you've typed something else in, then you're going to get an error message because you haven't selected one of the three possibilities. The code in Python would look something like this. So you've got your variable set up called vote. You're setting it as an input, and then you're asking the user to choose either 1 for Clinton, 2 for Trump, or 3 for Weir. If they type in the number 1, then if vote is equals to 1, you're going to print you voted for Clinton. If they put 2, then they're going to put Trump. If they put 3, it's going to say Weir. If they type in anything apart from 1, 2, or 3, it's going to say you've entered something wrong. So that is an if-else if statement. It's checking to see each condition one at a time. If the first condition is true, then it does that particular thing. After that, it's not going to check through the other particular items. As I said at the start of the video, you can't really do switch case statements in Python. So you might still get it to pop up on your exam. It might ask you what it's called. It might show you what one looks like in pseudocode and ask you to explain what it does. Something like that. So switch case statements, instead of checking to see if a statement is true or false, what you can do is just switch between the particular options that are available. So that could be used for some sort of menu system, or in this case we'll apply it to the same scenario that we've just used for the voting system. So because a switch case looks for a specific value rather than checking to see if something's true, it's basically used to perform different actions for different values of a variable. The switch case statements have a similar structure to the if-else if statements, but they're a little bit neater. They're also a lot easier to maintain, but the drawback is it can only check one variable at a time. Let's take a quick look at some pseudocode that's kind of similar to Python, but some pseudocode structure that is looking at an example program. So we've got the vote variable again. We're asking them what to vote for. This time we're saying switch vote. So that is how you set up a switch statement, and you have to put end switch at the end. Then so in between switch vote and end switch, you need to put the different possible options. And for each possible option, you tell the program what you want it to do. So case 1, print this, case 2, print this, case 3, print this, end switch. That's how you set up a switch statement. And if you go back to the if else if, you can tell straight away that it's a little bit more structured and a little bit shorter. So that's the end of the video about selection. The next video that we're going to look at is iteration.